Large-scale data centers are emerging so rapidly that utilities are scrambling to keep the lights on. The US has just told big tech, if you want the power to run data centers, you pay for it. But here's the problem. Even if tech companies pay more, your electric bill can still go up. Not because of politics, but because of how grid costs get allocated. Grid operators are being asked to secure power faster than the system was designed to handle. According to Axios, nearly 3,000 new data centers are under construction or planned across the US. And when demand grows faster than infrastructure, there are only a few options. Build fast and raise costs, slow projects down, or fight over who pays. In January, the Trump administration and group of governors put out a statement of principles aimed at PJM, the largest U.S. power grid operator, serving over 67 million people across 13 states. The ask was unusually direct. They want tech companies to foot the bill for new power plants tied to the demand for AI data centers. They also requested PJM to run an emergency capacity auction for that power. The plan explicitly calls to protect residential customers from capacity price increases due to big tech companies. The same day, PJM's board said it would begin immediate actions to secure more power for short-term reliability. The reality is that data centers are booming, the grid is aging, and households are already carrying large parts of the costs. This request to PJM isn't just about one rule. It's the center of gravity shifting toward a new question. When a massive new electricity user connects, who pays for the wires and the supply? In many places, large customers pay directly for what they need to connect, which is known as the participant-funded model. But there's a key exception here. If a grid upgrade is judged to provide broader benefits like reliability or congestion relief for multiple users, regulators can allow costs to be recovered through rates paid by everyone. That technical distinction is where the political pressure is landing. At the federal level, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has opened a process focused on large load interconnections, asking whether the existing rules were ever designed for customers this large, and whether costs are being assigned fairly as their impact spreads across the grid. In Congress, the Power for the People Act proposes a more direct version of the same idea. Separate the costs tied to data centers instead of blending them into everyone else's bills, and push cost responsibility toward the loads that trigger local transmission upgrades. Meanwhile, states are moving in parallel. In 2025, lawmakers introduced more than 60 pieces of legislation across 22 states, focused on how to prevent those costs from automatically flowing to residential customers. To see why these payment rules are suddenly on the table, you have to start with the physical constraint. The grid can't scale on the same timetable as data centers are built. The Department of Energy estimates data centers used about 4.4% of U.S. electricity in 2023 and is projecting that it could rise to 6.7% to 12% by 2028. It also shows the underlying jump in consumption, from 58 terawatt-hours in 2014 to 176 terawatt-hours in 2023, with projections of 325 to 580 terawatt-hours by 2028. That load doesn't arrive evenly. It concentrates in specific corridors, and it often arrives in blocks large enough to behave like new industrial cities. A new data center isn't just a bigger electric bill at one address. It can force upgrades across multiple layers: local distribution equipment, substations, and sometimes broader transmission. And if those upgrades aren't coordinated, the impacts can spread: congestion, tighter reliability margins, and delays for other projects trying to connect. In regions like PJM, there's another mechanical link. Reliability isn't only about today's energy use. It's also about having enough available capacity in future years. That's why the emergency capacity auction is talked about to shield residential customers from capacity price increases. When demand rises faster than supply, the price of ensuring future availability can climb. This is where the money question becomes unavoidable. Some of the costs of serving a large load can be billed directly to that customer, but other costs can be treated as system-wide investments and recovered through rates. That classification decision is what determines whether a data center is paid for like a private facility or partially paid for like shared infrastructure. For households, The effects of new data centers already show up on bills across the country. Reuters cites the Energy Information Administration's monthly electricity report. Residential electricity rates were up 5.2% in October versus the same time in 2024. The same Reuters piece also references a Bloomberg analysis that found electricity in areas near major data center activity costs as much as 267% more for a single month than 5 years earlier. To mitigate the effects locally, states are making progress as the data center boom accelerates. For example, California's SB 57 directs regulators to assess how data center loads cause cost shifts, including the risk of stranded assets if an entity ceases operation. And Texas's SB 6 requires reevaluating cost allocation methods and says new large loads should contribute to the upgrades serving them. The policy shifts matter long-term because once the grid is built for a load, the costs don't disappear. Transmission, substations, and generation are long-lived assets, and regulators have to decide whether those costs stay tied to the customer who triggered them, or move into rates that everyone pays. That's why states are writing new rules now, including explicit concerns about stranded assets if a large facility scales back or closes after upgrades are built. At the federal level, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is examining whether the existing interconnection framework is equipped for the scale and speed of large loads, because those interconnections can create wider system impacts and recurring cost disputes. And that returns us to the central question. When leaders say, "Make big tech pay," they're not just talking about a single bill. They're trying to set a precedent for how the next wave of grid expansion gets financed, before it's locked into everyone's monthly rate base. In summary, even if tech companies pay for part of the build-out, households can still be exposed when reliability costs rise across the system, or when upgrades are treated as shared infrastructure and folded into general rates. The dispute is less about whether tech pays something, and more about which costs stay tied to the new load versus which costs get spread across everyone else. What changed is that the US is no longer treating data centers like ordinary new customers. They're treating them like grid-scale events, trying to rewrite the rules before it's too late. Please let us know in the comments whether data centers are affecting your community. If this was useful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.